Good morning, grade 7 class. Welcome to lesson 3 of colonization in the world and how we got to where we are today. So I'm excited to be here. This is the third one I've done. I hope they're getting a little more interesting for you. But if not, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. Hopefully you survive Corinth. I think you can do it. Grade 7s, please take time, pause the video, and answer these two bell ringer prompts. When you're finished, hit play again, and we will continue on with our video. Hit pause. Now, what was the age of exploration? Remember, it's this time in history, starting in the 1400s, where the world basically was trying to get more of the rest of the world and see what's out there, not knowing what it is. And so Christopher Columbus, Chabot, all these different people are being sent out by kingdoms and on their own or by companies to explore what's out there and to see what is beyond the sea, what is farther along the coast of Africa, places where people have been already sometimes, like Marco Polo, but then others who hadn't. So there's these explorers going out, and the world is getting smaller. They're mapping it, they're being able to navigate the seas. The next one, describe what consuming colonies and hatching hierarchies. A consuming colony, remember, is we find this in colonization where the colony is consuming or receiving or purchasing the products that are produced by the mother country. So, be it guns, alcohol, pots, pans, metal, things like that, they're being the resources are being taken from colonies, sent to England or the mother country, and then back to the colonies and resold. That is the definition of a consuming colony. Hatching hierarchy is where the mother country is the one who's establishing the forms of governments in the colony. So they either take over or they expand and they grow, but the mother country is the one establishing the government, the ones who's making control, often through the form of a company or through a governor or someone who's placed there who allows other people from the country or mother country to be the ones in power. Bagus? Empires overseas. This is a little something before we get into India. I think today's India. Emperors overseas. So as this age of exploration is going on, the the countries in Europe, the mother countries, they're not just having a city here and there. They're beginning to develop empires. So we saw the great strength and power of the British Navy through this time, where they could extend, and the Dutch, the reason why the Dutch were so powerful, things like that, is because of their navy, because of their simple things, well, not really simple at the time, but ability to industrialize, the ability to manufacture things like guns, boats, um, and establish themselves in power. Because if you come up to a tribe where they're all using spears and arrows and you take out a machine gun, right, or a musket, you will devastate that population just with pure force because of technology and ability to produce goods. And so that's where money comes in. And so these European countries, as they expand and they grow, they become more powerful because they have the money, they have the resources, they have the technology. They grow more powerful and they begin to consume the rest of the world. So as discoveries happen in the European countries, they establish trading posts, right? As they're going around to Africa or other places, these trading posts where they fill up with water, food, things like that before they continue on in their journey. Then it becomes more than that. It becomes a place of like a fort, a fortress where there's soldiers present, things like that, and it becomes under the influence, and then it becomes almost like a city-state from ancient Greeks, but part of the empire. And so it starts bringing, okay, the presence and the rule of these foreign countries to these local places, and they begin, as they discover the world, to control the rest of the world through what we will see as colonization. Um, we're not talking about that. Okay, India. We're talking about India under the English. Remember, this is an overview, very quick overview of Indians' colonization. Under the English and the French sphere of influence in the 1600s. So in the 1600s, yes, they were there. They made it around the Horn of Africa and they're trading back and forth. The French and the English always seem to be competing for some of the best places in the world for having colonies. While they're there, they're under the sphere of influence. They're not under direct control. Remember, we'll have that in our term sheet, but they're under the influence, sphere of influence. They have basically control over it, but not direct control. After the 7 Years' War, England took control over all of the French networks. It was a great war for the English, terrible one for the French. Okay, the French lose, they give everything the English basically wants back to them except for their own country. And England now has control over India, the honeypot of the age of exploration, the one everyone was going for. India is where all the spices, the fancy things that they want in Europe is coming from. So in the year 1756, that's the 7 Years' War, and it goes to the British. The British begin to operate by using the local Mahal rulers. Okay, so they took control of the Bengal, made it a British headquarters, and the foundation growing from there. So they established this port. They operated by using the local rulers. So instead of them going in and demanding control, they sometimes there's bribery through force, things like that. They would in be in be controlling through an indirect way. Okay, so these local rulers would do the work for them, almost like a puppet ruler for the British. From there, they they just established a base and then began to expand it throughout the land of India. Okay, the British East India Company was founded, and it was the main instrument in bringing the British and establishing their presence for almost the rest of the time. Um, what they were is they were looking after the interests of England. So they were not the English government, but they represented them. They did things on behalf of them. But remember, it's all about money and control. So this British East India Company is there. They're the only ones there. The French have been kicked out. They are the ones who are receiving all the spoils of colonizing this country. So in 1784, the British Parliament established a cabinet member over the company. So this company has control over another colony that is 5 or 6 times the size of the actual mother country. So they establish a presence of the government there, which is the beginning of the government takeover of the British East Indian Company. This East India Company continued to expand. Um, as a result of the government control, the parliament took away the company's trade monopoly, so they opened it up to other people in India, and they actually did the same in China after that. It was kind of it was good, but and kind of bad depending on who you are. But they're they open it up, ending the monopoly, making it more available, and so there's goods coming and going. I think competition's a good thing for markets, but the important thing is the government control of this company began to change it, and so this company needed to find new ways to make the easy bucks and to become rich. How they do this? Okay, they began to expand. So even without a monopoly, the British East India Company was active and growing their control deeper and deeper into India. They still used a lot of the same tactics. They were maybe more empowered now because they had a member of parliament overseeing their company, and so they had access to more armies, things like that. So they would expand the company deeper and deeper into India through two ways. The first way was simply marching the army in and taking it. Stick up your dukes, right? They shoot you or give us all our stuff, and so they or give them the stuff that they want or begin working, and so they expanded through force. We would say that'd be a land grab, but another way of doing the land grab is through strategic alliances with the local rulers. So they would maybe conquer a certain area, right, with their guns, and then the surrounding kingdoms or rulers would say, "Oh, we don't want to mess with that army, so we will be friends with you. We'll give you whatever you need. Tell us what you want, but let us be in control." So it was almost like the same thing they did before, a puppet ruler, somebody who was already ruling the people, but now was being controlled by the power of the British East India Company. In 1850, almost all of India was under the British control. There's a few places that weren't, um, and it's quite incredible that that actually happened. Such a small country in Europe controlling such a large one in England, but remember that came through things like technology, which we'll learn about. So huge strength, a lot of control up until 1850. The 1850s roll around, British is humming along. They've got a lot of money coming from the Indians in India and all these things. They're producing and they're getting wealthy, and this colony is very valuable to them. But then the Sopai Rebellion. This is really interesting because last year we focused on rebellions in grade 6 IS, and a lot of them were on how hungry people rebel, right? And how government things like that they influence these people, the policies, the amount of money they have, the taxes, things like that, and then people out of hatred or out of starvation or out of desperate need rebel against the government. The Sopai Rebellion is one that sticks out as one that didn't happen for that. It's very interesting because the armies in India were made up mostly of locals, okay, being commanded by the British. So the English army in England issued new rifles to all of their colonies. And so these new rifles arrived, but they had a small problem. Well, maybe not so small, but the problem was that the English guns were made in England, but not in India. But the English army in India was all Indians. The dominant religion in India is Hindu and Muslims. Okay? Now, there's certain things that Muslims and Hindus can't eat. However, these guns, having been produced, back then, you load the musket, you put the bullet down there, and you put a little slabber of fat in there so it wouldn't get stuck in the barrel on the way out, right? So it's lubricant to go down. The new guns had cartridges that when they were loaded, the soldier would have to bite off the end of them and shove them down. These cartridges used uh, fat fat from beef and pork to make the bullets work. So if you are a Muslim, you cannot eat pork or you're unclean, right? And the same is with Hindus and beef. Cows are holy, right? So there's a problem for these people. So out of anger, the army says, "We are not doing this. Who are you, the British, to make bullets and guns for us and expect us to use them and go against our religious delegation?" So they rebel, and the rebellion, okay, broke out and it was just amongst the soldiers. Okay, just amongst, it wasn't against the government, it's just amongst the soldiers. We don't want to use these guns. They're rebelling because of the types of guns they have. Imagine that. And then the soldiers rebelled, but the British squashed it very quickly. The rebellion resulted in the British East India Company being disbanded and the British government taking control. Basically, the government was waiting for the one thing to happen that they could step in, take control of the British East India Company, then all of India is under their control. After this, they divided India into half. Half the country would be controlled by the Indians, and they gave them the right to govern and those kinds of things. Very interesting if you want to dig into it more. But then the other half was operated by the wonderful British Parliament, okay, which wasn't always so wonderful. However, India is now on its path to independence, or what we would consider independence for a colonized country. The next thing over time, so we're looking at 20 years, 30 years. Over time, even the British side of the country was beginning to be ruled by Indians. So Indians began to be educated. They had roles in government. The society was starting to take off, and so more Indians are being a part of the Congress on the Parliament of the other side being controlled by the British. And in 1885, the Indian National Congress was formed and began the self-governance of all of India. So India became an independent, self-governed country, still under the Commonwealth, but this was huge steps because in Canada they didn't get theirs until about 100 years later, and so I'm from Canada, that's why I put that in there. The language of the English, okay, so there's a lot of oppression, there's a lot of exploitation, it was colonization. However, there is one thing that if you can find a good in colonization, this is one of them. The language of English is still remembered as the thread that unified the country. Saying there wouldn't be an India that we know today that's so unified, so strong, and so big, and so powerful. It is a pretty powerful country if it wasn't for the English language. The English language that was brought by the colonizers that united the east to the west, north to the south, and people would learn them under colonization, and it was a way that they could make laws, communicate, and establish unity. So there you have it. Today, you don't have any reflection questions, but you will have to submit your bell ringers to Manchback for today. I like to see them. If you need to make any adjustments, let me know. As always, hit me up if you have any questions, if you need a chat, or if you like a video on a certain part of this or explanation. I'm always here available for you. Bye.